All right, welcome everybody to this episode of O365Eh. And today we're going to talk about Microsoft 365 Copilot extensibility, specifically extending it with a plugin to access a custom or third-party application. So to talk with us about this is Vincent Biret from Microsoft. Welcome, Vincent.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. And when we kick things off, just give our listeners a little overview of yourself and what you do at Microsoft.
Sure. I've been working on Microsoft for almost 5 years now. I'm on the Microsoft Graph Developer Experience team. So we're in charge of all the SDKs, the Graph Explorer, which is a tool that you can use to explore Microsoft Graph and try the APIs, and also Microsoft Graph toolkits and a number of different tools. I personally work on Kyoda, which is a code generator for REST APIs for OpenAPI. And more recently, we've also taken on responsibility for pro developer experience for Copilot. So if you want to extend Copilot, how do you do that as a developer with the tools that you're familiar with and a developer fashion, CI/CD, control source, and everything like that. I am based out of Montreal, and I know most of you from a previous life as a Microsoft MVP. By the way, congratulations to all of you for getting renewed this year on the MVP program.
Awesome. Thanks, Vincent. So yes, congrats to all the Microsoft MVPs out there who were renewed. Yesterday was the big renewal day, so we're all happy about that. So let's dive in and talk about Microsoft 365 extensibility with plugins. Of course, there's a number of different ways you can extend Microsoft 365. And even before this call and the announcements at Build, there are different ways to integrate custom data with M365 Copilot. Right. What we're going to talk about today is using the plugin form factor, if you will, to access a custom or third-party application through an API. So why don't you just walk us through at a high level what that looks like, Vincent, and then what we're going to demo.
Sure. So when you talk about agents and Copilot specifically for Microsoft 365, they are very good at generating text. And sometimes that text can be not based on truth, not based on data, because we don't have enough data points. So they make things up because they're trained at a specific time and they only know what they're trained on. So then that's when you run a model and those kind of things, right? So then a good way to make sure it always has the latest data and it replies to you with information that is grounded in factual data is to make sure it can access that additional data. So one point, of course, is searching the web. And when you go to Bing Chat, for example, that's what it does. It's an LLM, and it's able to search the web to retrieve additional information and information that is up to date, and use that to reason over, right? For Copilot for Microsoft 365, obviously it's integrated with the whole data store of Microsoft 365, things like your email, your calendar, your documents, the people you work with, and so many other things. And it's able already to retrieve that information and reason over that depending on what kind of question you ask it. The challenge comes when you try to ask it to reason over data that it doesn't have access to or applications that it's not connected to. And most of the time, because it's implemented in a safer approach, it will tell you, hey, you asked me this question. I don't really know about that. I don't know what to do. Sorry, you're on your own, effectively, right? But as a developer, you have this ability, multiple different ways to extend Copilot to tell it, hey, if the user asks you about those kind of topics, there's a data store there that you can query over, which is that technique is called RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. And go query that data store, find whatever data you can find, and then reason over the prompt from the user and the data you received, and try to provide an answer to the user. There are a couple of ways you can do that through Microsoft 365 Copilot, one of which is through the former graph connectors that are now called Copilot connectors. And when you do that, periodically you just push data to Microsoft Graph proactively, and Microsoft Graph will index it for you and provide it to Copilot. So the data will only be as fresh as the last time you pushed your data to Microsoft Graph. The other way you can do that is through SharePoint and SharePoint websites. You can say to SharePoint, hey, I really want to train a specific agent. I really want to have an HR skill, for example, or an accounting skill, or whatever you can imagine, based off all the documents that are within that specific site. And that's more of power user admin kind of workflow where you say, I'm selecting this site and those documents, and I'm going to train a skill very specifically based off of that. And the last thing that we're going to see today is through plugins. The idea is to say, here's a plugin, here's how you can retrieve data for an API that connects to an application. Like think about your ticketing system or your expensing system or your line of business system, or if you have a factory, maybe your production or your storage management system. And so now Copilot will be enhanced in the sense that it knows there is additional data it can query there, talk to that API, get the data, reason over that, and answer the user at the end, right? That's the general picture of the different ways you can extend Copilot, and specifically plugins to talk to APIs, to talk to third-party applications.
Yeah, that sounds really great overview. And I think the real exciting thing about this extensibility model is here you have Microsoft 365 Copilot out of the box. It has access to all your Microsoft 365 data via the graph, but now we can extend it to have access to all the capabilities of a custom or third-party application.
Right.
So for the end user, they get to all the benefits of generative AI capabilities, natural language processing, integrated with Microsoft 365 and the functionality of these other applications. So that's great.
Yes, that's a lot of value you get out of the box actually, because a fourth way that that is more complicated and you need data scientists and people that are specialized in that would be to train or fine tune your LLM yourself. So you take an existing LLM, you provide it a large data set, you need a lot of computing power and expertise to go train it, and then you would train your own agent by yourself on your own stack. But then when you do that, you also need to think about deploying it securely, making sure it stays up and running, making sure you can do too much prompt hacking or anything like that. And that takes a lot of expertise, and it's a whole other ballpark, right? So when you get Microsoft 365 Copilot, you already have all this expertise and all these efforts done for you by Microsoft, already connected to your data. And then you can extend it with your line of business data or third-party applications to make it smarter. But this whole stack with the security, the compliance, and the protections against prompt hacking and all those kind of things are very valuable to customers, we believe. Yeah.
Super. All right. Well, let's dive in and see a demo. And before we do that, I think we should clarify that everything you're going to demo today, a lot of it isn't available
right
quite yet. It's being worked on, and
yes,
will actively be released sometime soon. And so, exactly what technologies are we going to use here to extend Copilot?
So first off, this is Copilot. In case people have not seen it before, it's a prompt place that you can talk to, and it's available on office.com. It's available on Teams. It's available in the Office suite like Outlook, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and whatnot, and a number of different places, right? The engine behind all those copilots is all the same, like all the security compliance the data has access to is all the same across those different surfaces. They're just different experiences where you see Copilot show up. And also, eventually, you also start seeing Copilot show up in your group conversations or in your meetings. It's already available in the meetings as a matter of fact. And you'll be able to proactively just mention it and say, hey, just go augment this conversation and help us within this context, right? And so this is for the UI and the tech stack for the LLM and the Copilot behind the scenes. Now, when we talk about tools we're going to use to extend Copilot today, we're going to use two tools. First, the Teams toolkit, which is an SDK that you use to extend Teams, to create tabs, to create message extensions, and other things within Microsoft Teams. What I'm going to be showing today is to use the Teams toolkit as a deployment vehicle. We'll use the Teams toolkit to deploy the plugin to Copilot as we deploy an application, as we deploy other things within Teams. This capability of deploying plugins is currently internal only. It's behind feature flags and private builds and other things. So you won't be able to do that today, but we are working very hard to make it available as a public preview and later on as a general availability to all of you out there. And then the second tool I'm going to be using today for the demonstration is Microsoft CUDA, which is the tool I work on with my team. This is a code generator that allows you to generate clients for REST APIs thanks to OpenAPI. So that's already available. You can already use it to generate a C# client or a Go client or whatever other language you care about client to talk to any API that has an OpenAPI description. That's available. You can go use it and generate clients and build your applications. The part that is not publicly available today is the plugins generation part. So as CUDA already has all this intelligence to reason over OpenAPI descriptions and understand which operations you care about, which paths you care about, we reuse that intelligence to be able to generate plugins for different LLMs like Copilot, like Microsoft 365 Copilot or OpenAI or other ones. And that part is still behind feature flags and preview builds. Again, we'll be working in the next weeks or month to make that generally available. So if we think about the demo specifically, let's imagine that you're a building management company, right? And you have this line of business or a car repair shop company, and you have this line of business application that allows you to schedule all the repairs that are ongoing or that needs to be done in the building or on your fleet or whatever it is, right? By default, because this is an external application, Copilot doesn't know about that. If you prompt it to say, list all the upcoming repairs here, it will probably tell you, hey, I don't know what you're talking about, and tell you basically that you're on your own. Or maybe it will find documents within the company and base its answer on those documents. So let's give it a little bit of time. I'm sorry, there you go. I'm sorry, but it seems that I don't have any records for upcoming repairs or anything like that. And so again, this is not a great experience for the user. You want the user to be able to interact with your application within the context of Copilot with a natural language, and maybe they mix your application with some other application and the data and they mash it up together and so on and so forth. Right. So how do we get from here where Copilot doesn't know about your repairs in your line of business application to a state where it knows about those things? Let's pop up VS Code. Can you just confirm that it's big enough here? Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
So here, what I have here is I have created an empty Teams Toolkit solution. It's, again, you use the Teams Toolkit extension for VS Code or VCLI, and you go ahead and create a new project. And this is more or less what you will get with this app package thing and a couple of other documents created here for you. Once I have that, now I need to create a plugin within that to tell Copilot where to find the additional data about the repairs here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use the CUDA extension. As you can see, I have a lot of extensions installed here. And I'm going to try to find an API description for the repairs API. So I'm going to search for one, type repairs. There you go. And as you can see, it found one result about any potential repairs API. So this is currently looking on GitHub, but CUDA has multiple indices. One which is apis.guru, which is an open source index out there. They index thousands of open API descriptions. Another one is GitHub itself. If you have a public GitHub repository. If you add the right label to it and a special file and your open API description in there, you can have your API discoverable by CUDA here, and people can start generating clients and Copilot plugins for that API description right out of the box. You don't need to change anything. And if you have internal repositories or internal API catalog tools that you would like to see indexed by CUDA, let us know about that because we're really interested about hearing your scenarios and the enterprise scenario about internal APIs that you don't want exposed to the outer world, but you still want to enable a great developer experience for. So here, what CUDA did is it downloaded the description for the repair service, and it opened the different operations that are available on this API. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the get operation and the post operation. If you know a little bit about the HTTP semantics, you know that get is usually to retrieve information about a specific item or to list a set of items here, and post is usually to create new records or entities on the service by conventions. So once I've done,
Vincent, I think you're highlighting here a huge benefit of CUDA is being able to create tiny clients, so really focus clients on the aspects of the APIs that you're working with. So if you're using, like, say, the Microsoft Graph, you don't have to create an SDK or a client that is the full graph spec, but you can pick the specific endpoints or calls that are part of that client.
Yes, that's one of the big benefits of CUDA, being able to be laser focused on what you care about, as opposed to grabbing a published SDK like my team publishes, or having to build your own with everything. Graph has over 20,000 operations. Obviously, that makes for large SDKs. We're very happy for you to use the SDKs that we publish out there that cover the whole API surface, but maybe your API application scenario doesn't need all of that. And maybe you care about the size of your application and you want to narrow it down to just a few operations. The nice thing about CUDA is because we're a Microsoft Graph team, we use CUDA for the Microsoft Graph SDKs. So whether you use our out-of-the-box prepackaged Microsoft Graph SDK or use a CUDA-generated SDK just for the few operations you care about, you'll get the same exact experience. It's going to be exactly the same regardless of whether you use a package or you generate your own. Yes. Also, Red Hat and GitHub have started generating SDKs using CUDA as well. So as we see more and more adoption through those companies and other partners, I cannot talk about right now, you will see that consistent experience across different API surfaces and different API providers surface up, basically. So to get back to the demonstration, here I've selected my two operations. I'm going to go ahead and generate something. Here we're not going to generate a client today. We're going to generate a plugin. I'm going to call it the repairs service here, and it's going to be an API plugin. And instead of putting it at the root of the solution, I'm going to put it in a very specific directory. In the app package directory here, select, there you go. The reason why I put it in this app package directory is because of the semantics of Teams Toolkit. It expects it to be at a specific place so it can know about it and deploy it for us. So you will see that we have a couple of new files here. First off, the new things are outlined in green, and the things that have been modified are outlined in orange here. First off, we have a plugin definition here. So this will define to the LLM, here is a plugin, here is its name, here is the description for the human, here's the description for the model, and part of what CUDA will place default placeholders here, it gets from the OpenAPI description. But part of your job as a Copilot developer, a Copilot professional developer, will be maybe to tweak those descriptions here. So you provide more context to the LLM about what is this plugin about, what can it do, and when is it relevant in the conversation and when is it not. So this is what you call prompt engineering or prompt fiddling, and this is how you get better returns from the LLM and Copilot within the context of a discussion. Then within that, we have two functions, one which is list the repairs, to list all the repairs. We'll see that in action in a couple of minutes. And one which is create repair, to create a new repair here. And lastly, it says, hey, if you want more information about this plugin and this API and what can it do, here is an Open API description. So if we move over to the description we generated, sorry about all the yellow here. I forgot to disable an extension here, but anyway, this is an Open API description that says here is a repair service, here is the get operation, here's the post operation. But interestingly, you don't see the delete or the patch that we saw in the tree view, and also the components that we're the models that we're not using are not here as well. This is very important, because as you know, LLMs only have a limited window of characters that they can accept when they prompt. And all of that, the plugin definition, the description, the request and the response, and the prompt from the user, all of that will get fed to the LLM as it answers the customer. And when this description gets too large, the LLM basically chokes on it and says, hey, I'm not able to use that plugin, sorry about that. And this is one of the value you get out of Kyoto. You get this very thin description about only the operations you care about, to your earlier point. And that's going to be making the LLM's job much easier, especially for large APIs that have potentially thousands of operations like Microsoft Graph. Lastly, the other modification we've had here, I'm going to clean this up just to make it clear, is this Copilot extensions in the Teams Toolkit manifest, and it says one of the things I want to deploy within that application, that Teams application, is a Copilot extension that has a plugin which is the repair service, which points to those two files we just talked about earlier. You could also have, I don't know, tabs or message extensions or other things that you're used to with the Teams Toolkit, but this is how you tell it, hey, here is a Copilot plugin I want to deploy. Yes, Curtis.
This is great. I just want to ask a question that came to mind. Whenever we extend Copilot and you deal with LLMs, there's this concept of skills. You expose skills. Right. In the context of what you just showed, what is the skill? Is it the repair, the create, repair, and the get repair?
The skill itself is going to be the plugin here. And then within that skill, you have a different set of capabilities. It's a bit difficult to map because some of them are LLM terms and some of them are developer extensibility terms. And I don't think we've aligned the terminology completely just yet. And maybe this is something for us to take away and to improve on. But the idea is that what you could map to a skill is knowing about repairs and doing stuff about repairs, right? And then under that, you have those actions that can be performed, or those functions that are creating a new repair and listing existing repairs, right?
So the skill is the repair service, and then the capabilities within it are the ones you showed there. Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Thanks.
And then maybe further to that, the skills of repair service. So does it use the description on that the JSON file that you had open earlier
right.
to determine, like, hey, the user entered in some information, does it match the repair skill, and then load the plugin details? So that's not in the memory with the LLM as you build more and more plugins, slowing things down. It waits for just that like kind of line 6 to kind of match, and then
exactly. So when you do RAG, it will do multiple prompts within the LLM and behind the scenes. You have a user's question, right? And then the LLM parses that question if you want and tries to see if it already knows about that from its pre-training. Then depending on how it's been configured with the window, and when you give a question to an LLM, especially Copilot, it's not just your question that goes to the LLM. It's a bunch of additional instructions to prevent from prompt hacking, to have a bit more context, to know who is the user talking to them, and a couple of things like that, right? So with all that whole block, it does a first round of reasoning, sorry. based on the information it was trained on. And then if it already knows the answer, it will reply with that. But if it doesn't, what it will do is it will start searching the default sources, like searching the web, searching Microsoft 365 information. And when that happens, what it does is it takes your question, fires it up to the search index internally at Microsoft 365, but also the search index for the web, gets all that information back, and does another round of reasoning with the LLM based on your prompt, original prompt, and that information. If it can answer with that, it will answer back to you. If it can't, then it will go through all the plugins here and try to reason over the prompt list with your original prompt to try to elect one of the plugins to see if it's there is potentially a matching plugin. If it finds a plugin that could match, we'll see that in the demo in a couple of minutes, it will tell you, hey, I found a plugin, can you use it to go query for some data? And if you say yes to that, it will go query the data, come back with it, and do another round of prompt between the original prompt, the data it retrieved, the context of a plugin, like the sentences we saw here, and try to reason over that and provide you with an answer. This is why sometimes LLMs can be a bit slow to respond, because there's actually a lot of things happening in the background, and we're working very hard to make it so it's blazing fast, and so you don't see the wait time for all that things that are happening in the background. So let's go to the demo. So once you are you have created your tool, your extension, your plugin within the manifest and within the Teams toolkit, what you do is you click on provision here. If this takes a couple of minutes, so I've done it ahead of time in the interest of time for the demonstration here. And now when you come here and you reload the window, you'll see that it will know about my repairs. Loading. So one of the things I wanted to outline for the people listening to us here is whenever they try to extend Copilot, one very important information they should know about is developer on here. This is a special command here that will instruct Copilot to enable the developer mode. And it will give them additional information as they debug the plugins about which plugin were selected, which ones were not, why is that, and so you can iterate and improve your plugin definition. So now, if I do list all upcoming repairs here, so let me check the plugin is enabled first. Yeah, if I prompt with the same prompt as earlier, you'll see that it will do a couple of things. Again, it does parsing and the indexing of a question here. It tries to go across Microsoft 365, won't find anything because we have not create any documents about that. And then it found our plugin. And the first thing it tells you from a security and privacy perspective is, I found a plugin that could match that. But to query that information, I need to connect to a third-party API. Are you really sure you want to do that? And this is important because obviously we are developing this plugin, but as a user, if you have a number of plugins that are deployed to our environment, you might not want this specific question here to get to that specific service for a number of different privacy and security reasons, right? So I'm going to allow this one. And before I do so, you also have information about, like when you consent to applications on Microsoft Graph, you will have developer info for the plugin here and additional context for the user to be able to tell whether they should trust or not, those kind of things, right? So I'm going to allow this here. And so it will proceed with a question. And while it does that, Habib, I think you have a question.
Yeah, thanks, Vincent. So I was just wondering, so you can obviously have multiple plugins enabled for Copilot. So if you do have them enabled, how do you know sort of like which plugin takes priority over the other to sort of respond to your request? And is there any potential conflicts that could happen between plugins?
Yes. So that's a very good question. So a couple of things here. First, we'll see once it's done responding to me with all the information, you'll see that it will provide me with developer information that I was mentioning earlier. And it will tell you for that prompt, I found, I don't know, 6 plugins, and for whatever reason, I selected this one. And this is how you can tell how it does a prioritization based on the context. And this is how you can tweak your prompt that I was showing earlier to make sure it goes up the ranks. So that's one thing you can do. Obviously, we'll get to a point at some point where this list has maybe 200 plugins and it's not going to be manageable by users anymore. And so the next logical step here is to create what we call declarative copilots. So think about those plugins, those skills, as if you took an employee who doesn't know anything in your company and say, hey, I'm training you on this software that lists the repairs, right? And then you can train that same employee on the accounting system, and then you can train them on the HR system, and so on and so forth, right? And that employee becomes very general purpose, knows about lots of different systems. But sometimes when you give them a question about something, if you don't give them enough context, they might not be sure which application they should be using first, right? And this is the problem you're going to be facing here. What are declarative copilots is pre-canned context for Copilot, and it will show up as its own agent. It is as if you hired somebody and said, I'm only going to train you ever on all the HR systems, and that's it, nothing else, right? So what you can do in that context of declarative copilot is say, my declarative copilot will have this prompting context, but will also have only those plugins enabled. So the user doesn't get this menu to select the plugins anymore. It's my HR bot, let's call it Sammy for whatever reason. It will have its own presence within the Copilot ecosystem, but also within Teams and other aspects. And it will only ever query all the HR plugins that you have enabled for it and selected for it, and that's it. And you can do that for the HR stuff, you can do that for the accounting stuff, and so on. So if you have lots of plugins here, users now know that Sammy is HR, Melinda is accounting, and so on and so forth. Like you have those human relationships where you know this person works in accounting, you know that person works in HR, and so on and so forth, right? That's the next logical extensibility aspect. I'm not going to be showing that today because we already covered a lot of ground, and I don't want to confuse everybody, right? Oh, and yeah, so if you click on here, you'll see that it listed what plugins are enabled, what functions it found, like the create one and the list one, and which one it elected to query and to execute. And then further on, you can also see here the actual request it made to the service and the JSON payload and all those kind of things. So this is why the developer on that I was showing earlier here is really important when you do this extensibility. And as you can see, the answer here comes with all the items from the API. And what's really important here are those little things, links here that you can see that you can also extend, but we're not going to be showing here today, extend their UI and how they look and whatnot. This is really important because it tells the user, hey, this is actual data that I found somewhere on an API or in a document or something like that. I'm not hallucinating. This is grounded and you can trust this data. So this is where you want to get effectively, right? I think somebody else had their hand up, but I didn't catch who.
Yeah, no, just a super quick question about
Yes.
authentication. So whenever we use an API, typically we need to be authenticated. Does this use the like token, if you will, the context of the user, or is it some service principal or managed identity under the covers?
So this specific API for the demonstration is unauthenticated. That's just for demo purposes to get going faster because, you know, the most difficult problem for developers is authentication. And I don't want to spend, 15 minutes talking about authentication before I can show something. But yeah, the idea is if we go back here, where is it? It hasn't been generated because obviously this is non-authent. Yeah, there you go. Here, the auth type is known because this is an unauthenticated API. But one of the things we're working on is to also pre-generate that for you to say, hey, this is going to be OAuth with those different services to access, to acquire the token, to consent and whatnot, or it's going to be the Microsoft identity provider, and we already know who you are, so we don't need to ask you anything, all those things for you. So then we can carry that context of who the user is and how they signed in and whatnot to the API itself. And maybe the API does, I don't know, security trimming of the information it returns, or maybe it does some kind of ordering based on that, right? And you get all that nice addition of who the person is with the logic of a plugin and with the logic of the API itself behind the scenes. Yeah.
Sounds good.
And so now the last part is we are also able to create new records if we want to. So I'm going to try that. Again, all internal previews. We'll see if it works. If it doesn't, that's fine. Can you create a new repair for the light switch in the basement and schedule it for more? Please.
Do you know if plugins have the ability to create those like suggested prompts at the main level? So like when you were typing in this action, you know how Copilot will normally give you some options of like, hey, maybe try these. Can your plugins also create items in there, or do you have to wait till the Copilot matches a plugin?
So proactive suggestions is what you're asking for. This is a very good question for Seb. I know you have something scheduled with Seb as well. The Teams Toolkit gives you a lot of extensibility options for the typing area, for the message box. They have a special name for it that I'm skipping right now. But I know that with traditional bots, so not LLM bots, but the older bots that you had to, sequence all the logic yourself manually and so on and so forth in the past. This is something that they already support. So I would not be surprised that Teams within the plugin here would allow you to say, here's a bunch of suggestions for the users, for the functions here. So whenever you start typing here, they start, auto-completing or suggesting to you to do those sort of things, right? So it kind of surfaces your plugin. This is not something I have tried personally. I don't even know if it's on the roadmap, but I would not be surprised if this is a thing, because this is something they used to support for other scenarios, and it will make a ton of sense for Copilot as well. And so, yeah, so for the creation here, you'll see that it understood my question, and you will say, here's what I'm going to assign to the different fields. Are you okay with that? Because again, it's a Copilot, you're always in control. So before it changes anything, it will ask you a confirmation to make sure it's doing the right thing and it understood you properly. And I'm going to go ahead and confirm it. And it's going to go and talk to the API to create that additional repair for us. There, and if we show the developer information, you can even show the request here. You can see that it made a post to the repairs endpoint with that JSON payload specifically, and it got 200 back effectively. And yeah, I think that's it for the demo. I think we already covered a lot of ground today. I don't know if you had any additional questions. Yes.
Yeah, thanks for that. That was great. Is there any risk of hallucination when using this? Like, could it provide incorrect information? How do we look for that? And is that something of concern?
So yeah, when you work with LLMs, there is always a risk of hallucination, obviously, because what they are optimized for is generating text. That's what they are for, right? And obviously, depending on the context, the training, and whether we are doing RAG or not, or any additional augmentation stack or way to do augmentation, they might have enough context to answer you or not, and they might try to make things up. And so this is why it's really important to first leverage a stack you trust, that that has been properly trained, has proper securities in place, proper context within the prompting window to say, hey, if you don't know about that, don't make stuff up, just say you don't know. Like we saw, well, I refreshed that page, so this is gone, but at the very beginning we saw that because it didn't have enough context on the repairs, instead of trying to make things up, it just plain told us, hey, I don't know about that, so sorry, I'm not able to answer that. And I think with an enterprise context, it's really important to be on the safe side rather than try to make things up, right? When you talk about personal things and creativity aspects, like generating images or generating poetry or whatever else, it's fine to make things up. But when it's an enterprise solution, you cannot afford that, right? Because you might base your decisions on that, and if it's not grounded information, might lead to bad decisions being made effectively. And so then the next thing, if you want to train your users for change management, for any LLM out there, would be to be looking for those things. There are either little numbers like that, or sometimes they're underlined in our LLMs and our technologies that have links to the sources. And go check your sources. You know, when you watch videos on YouTube, most of the times the scientific educators will give you a lot of sources about their studies. Well, it's the same reaction, right? You should be able to listen or read what the LLM is telling you, but make sure there are sources that are provided and go check the sources. Same logic applies for Copilot or other LLMs, right? And lastly, this is where extending it is going to be super important, because you provide it with more context, because you provide it with more data sources or more training, and that additional context will lead to more accurate answers than if you didn't have done, if you had not done this work, basically.
Nice. And where should we and the listeners keep an eye out for more announcements about this when it's going to be fully released, that type of thing? Like, what's the best place?
One very good place to watch for will be the Microsoft 365 developer blog. I'll provide you the link so you can put it in the description as well. This is where most of the our team posts there. The Teams Toolkit team also posts there, and so we'll have announcement there. Big events also are very good. I know some of you might be going to Ignite, and when is it, September, October? Obviously there will be sessions and content there with the announcements and the releases. Yeah, I think those would be the main 2 points where I would be watching. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Super. Well, let's leave it there. That was an excellent demo, Vincent. Really exciting to see the power of extending Copilot to third-party and custom applications, and you did it within 40 minutes here. So that was fantastic.
Thank you for having me. It was a great set of questions.
Cool. And special kudos to you with the Canadian jersey in the background. That, of course, used to be our what we used to all dress up as. We've since upgraded to the polo shirt. So good talking to you, Vincent, and we'll see everybody on the next episode. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thanks.